This episode is sponsored by Volunteero, the volunteering management platform that helps you spend less time lost in spreadsheets and drowning in emails and more time developing your volunteering program and delivering impact. Whether you're coordinating 20 volunteers or 20,000 volunteers, Volunteero makes it simple to onboard, train, deploy, communicate, and report all in one easy-to-use platform. Today's episode of the Time for Impact podcast is proudly sponsored by Investing in Volunteers, the UK's quality standard for good practice in volunteer management. Check out more of their information updated regular on their LinkedIn page, and stay tuned to hear more about how IIV helps organisations create great volunteer experiences later in the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Time for Impact podcast. With myself, Chris Wade, recording today in February. I don't know when you'll get to listen to this podcast. It depends on my editing speed, but it's nice to be with you. And my co-host, Matt Cobble, is here as well. Hi, Matt. How are you?
Hi, Chris. I am good. Thank you. Again, it sort of depends on when you're listening to this, but I'm back after a short break. Great to be back and looking forward to more interesting conversations about volunteering.
Well, at least there's a good chance this episode will be released the same year that it's recorded, so we're okay there. So anyway, as always on the podcast, as regular listeners will know, we try to focus on what's innovative, what's groundbreaking, what's new, what's pushing the envelope when it comes to all things volunteering. And today's guest, of course, fits with that trend. We often bring you a person from the volunteering world. I think it's fair to say probably, I don't know how you'll feel about this, Paul, who is here. Our guest today comes from a different background, really, but is now very much feeling more and more at home, I hope, in the volunteering world as the days and weeks and months and years tick by. Because our guest today is Paul King from Enjoy Development. You may never have heard of Paul company Enjoy Development, I don't know, but you hopefully might start hearing a little bit more now about his app called Impactful, which is very much aimed at the volunteering world and finding ways to use his brilliant technology and experience in the world of AI, I guess, and the world of digital developments to start to perhaps revolutionise some of the way we might get involved in brokering volunteering, but also connecting people together in the world of volunteering. Anyway, enough from me. Paul, welcome to the podcast. And do you want to perhaps tell us better than I did who you are, where you're from, and how you got into the world of volunteering?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And thanks for the introduction. So, interestingly, I can straight away say I'm not from the volunteering background, which is really interesting. It gives me a fresh perspective. And of course, like a lot of people, I've helped out. And we can talk about that later, the idea of helping out. You know, I've been on committees, I've been captains of sport teams and so forth, and you put a lot of time into those, but that's not what people might consider being part of the background of the sector, living it, breathing it, being part of it. I'm very much a technologist. So I've been in software development, building products most of my entire career. And inside that space, most of it's been in field marketing. So this is all about organizing people, getting them into stores, collecting data, and using that to do reporting on behalf of some of the biggest brands in the world. So not only working for agencies, but also having my own companies as well, building that software. So very different background. So it's like, why am I here? Why am I talking about all of this stuff? You know, and that's, of course, because a few years ago, that was a change I wanted to make. And it was, for me, a kind of an interesting moment, one of those sliding door moments. And that was while I was at the time running a software division and business intelligence division as part of a large agency. One of my employees actually was always out, volunteering, was out demonstrating Extinction Rebellion, for example, and would come back to the office halfway through the day. And I just remember vividly a conversation with him about what impact you think you're making. How are you capturing that? How are you observing that? How's everyone around you kind of organizing, whether it's self-organizing or is there some kind of group that's helping organize this? And I really kind of like started, fair play to him. He kind of like took all my questioning. And, I thought I saw gaps. I thought I saw that there wasn't evidence, there wasn't organization. It was just one example, of course, at that time, but it made me really want to explore the area by myself a lot more. Something fresh, something exciting after many years of being in field marketing. I saw certain levels of similarity, and it seems strange, trying to sell some chocolate bars on the shelf, whereas it is the entire volunteering sector. But, there's this element of you're involved in people, you're involved in data. I thought there'd be a lot of organized data and structure so that you could see the impact that you were making. And that was my kind of like expectation when I started looking at what was out there. How could you volunteer? Put myself in the mindset, how can I volunteer? And what do? You go on Google. This is 3-4 years ago. You might be using AI now and asking questions or other tools. Certainly go on Google and just say, hey, volunteer in my area. Is that where most people start? And I wasn't really getting any results. And when I did, it was outdated. And when I started looking at any more national systems that were there, again, the experience wasn't great. From a software development background, I've got a very critical eye to software. I understand how to develop good interfaces for people where you can remove the barriers. Unfortunately, there was a lot of stuff that seemed to be the main places you might go, or the technological barriers that you would come into, that I was just seeing from day one. And I kind of couldn't believe it. So that really got my passion up to do more research and ultimately see what I could offer to this sector. So 3 or 4 years ago, I switched over, came out of field marketing, set up Enjoy Development, and decided that what I wanted to do within that was to use my experience and skills to really help the sector and to see what changes could be made. And that was the start of my story.
Yeah. And I should say from the start, probably for our listeners, this isn't a paid advertisement for Impactful or anything like that.
No.
And Impactful is very much a startup, I think it'd be fair to say, in this sector. But I invited you along because it felt that you was taking a different approach. And I thought that was really interesting to see how that develops for the sector and who follows suit and brings the next iteration. So it'd be nice to hear a bit about Impactful and what makes it different from the other players and the other platforms, whether they be regional platforms, whether it be something like Govo, or whether they be something like Do It, or whether they're ones run by the volunteer bureaus and so on. Where does Impactful potentially fit within that ecosystem? Where does it complement it? Where does it different from that, from the other players out there?
Yeah, for sure. Well, of course, when you start in something, you've only got a very initial view of what is already out there. You're just kind of learning that at the time. So there was two real approaches to how I ended up with Impactful. The first way was by doing research. So obviously you observe what's out there, the products that are out there. A lot of it was the research papers themselves. So you go way back to the Happy to Help survey, the Vision for Volunteering, the Community Life survey, and so forth. So all the major kind of sector level research papers, and they were making a lot of these statements saying you need innovative change, that you needed to bring the technology to where it is needed, especially if you look at the demographics of younger people and their participation. So a lot of information in there. So looking at that and seeing the platforms that existed that tended to be more just web-based, web discovery. You've got your volunteer management platforms, but really that initial engagement. So for me, I looked at this and I was exploring how maybe AI could help innovate by creating ideas, just being able to talk to AI about what you might need, what support you need. There's lots of barriers, mental health challenges that people have that they now use AI to go in and actually almost be like this virtual support as well. So how can you bring that into the actual experience of engaging in your awareness and interest in volunteering, rather than just being hit by a website with a please fill out all your details at this point. So it's much more about that kind of the technology needs to be where probably the younger people are. Impactful is designed to try and increase volunteering for 13 to 30-year-olds of the youth age. young people's age. But of course, there's demo kind of segmentations within that as well, obviously from school and then early professionals and so forth. So that's kind of like the main area of it. Of course, it can be used by anyone, but that's kind of like the focus way of trying to reduce those barriers. And when I was kind of looking at this and realizing that this was the approach, I started off with some tech demos like you would do to start with. So, the ability to generate volunteering ideas using AI on a mobile app and being able to do like content moderation kind of in real time and everything. Changing the language. So it's like if you are younger, then the tone of the responses you would get would be more applicable to you. And maybe saying, hey, you should get your parental guidance and everything support if you're thinking about doing this and so forth. So not requiring a listing that someone's had to keep updated on a website, but actually just exploring your own imagination. And this kind of approach really in my mind came to this bottom up versus top down consideration. So everything I'd seen had been very top down, which it is at a sector level, and even at a small charity level, for example, they're still trying to do it with limited resources and skills and so forth. But you've got this great divide. So I look at it from a point of view of there's this kind of systems approach, which is okay, let's allow people to discover something, and then we'll recruit them, and then we'll manage them, and then we'll retain them, and so forth. But the other side, if you look at it from the bottom up, you've got a very much about the user experience, the journey of the individual. Again, depending on where they are in their life and the challenges and the barriers that they face for many reasons. From that side of it, the first thing is this awareness, this curiosity, and that side of it, and this sense of, causes more than brands. I care about the environment, for example. I don't necessarily need to care about a specific charity. I just want to make a difference. And how do I explore that? And maybe I want to explore that in my own language. I don't want to be told like how I should think about it and what I should do. I want to explore that first. So this was the cultivation of an approach to something. When I started to speak to people within the sector about this, you can imagine there was quite a lot of interest in having this different take on it. Certainly support ultimately was one high level person that said to me, okay, go and build it then. So it's like, it's great and everything, but go and build it. So at that point, I realized I'm not really going to get someone saying, oh yeah, we're all in with you. You've got an idea. It was like, you need to prove yourself that you can actually do this, which is absolutely fine by me. I've had startups before. I know software development and work with major brands across the world. So the idea of creating something is not a problem. It's just the thing have the fit and does it have purpose? And fortunately for me, I'm in a position in my life where I can value what we're trying to achieve rather than like chasing some features because somebody's asking for it. So if the features don't fit, then we can change them. We're not tied in that way. So that was where I think the Impactful really makes a difference, is it comes from this bottom-up approach. Now, it doesn't exclude, absolutely you want the support. You want to help these 95% of charities that at that very tiny level that don't have the revenues, don't have the reach, don't have the connections to this younger audience, and they really would. And, and traditionally they would need to post those on your platforms, on your Facebooks, maybe on some of the national kind of discovery platforms, actually being able to engage in a way where they know that the young people have got this kind of exploratory tools. They can form activities, they can post them, put stickers on there, your hashtag stickers, so put it on social media, all the rest of it, really making the tool for the young people, but then engage with and create value for the organizations that then ultimately can support them when they want that like larger level support. So I think that's it. I think it's just very much about looking at it through the eyes of the real young people and innovating in that direction.
That's really interesting, Paul. I guess I sort of have a question to sort of launch off the back of that, I suppose, which is like, particularly you've come from a sort of a research, business intelligence kind of tech development background. You've applied those skills to sort of solve a challenge. I'm interested in your reflections. So therefore, when it comes to engaging young people, I think particularly from that original conversation you had with your colleague who've been out, doing things with Extinction Rebellion and stuff. I think Chris and I have often observed that organizations like that are functioning differently, or movements perhaps rather than organizations, movements like that are functioning differently. If you're going to boil it all down, what do you think the volunteer world is doing well, but what are we missing when it comes to engaging young people in volunteering or activism or whatever you want to call it, I suppose?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, isn't it? There is always, everyone values the immense amount of work that goes in with organizations to support their volunteers, to put everything they've got into it, because every organization has this great passion behind them, great causes behind them, and all the volunteers themselves are amazing people. So, of course, you never say anything anyone's doing wrong, because they're all doing such great things. The question is taking that and saying, is there more that they could do beyond it? And so then you say, well, okay, well, where are the gaps? What would they like to do more of? So I've probably come across always like breaking things down quite systematically in that way, logically, of going, okay, so what are people saying is the shortfall? What could they do more of? How can they engage? And so it goes back to the research again, which is it true that there is a decline in volunteering? Is it that people don't have the time? Is it that it's a supply issue or a demand issue? What is it? And if it could be solved, or improved, tracked back on an upwards curve, is there, intent for that to happen? Like, is there value behind it? And so, to kind of answer that more specifically, what can they do more of? Well, it's very much going back to the story of engagement. It's, if you would like to see a future where things like your social services don't collapse and that your local communities don't, kind of lose that kind of connection, and bring that back together again, then you need to be engaging with those younger people in the place that they are. And I've met youth groups that really coordinate online, say in Discord, for example, where they actually get together. They know that, yes, they are local in the area and they can get together, but to keep that conversation going, they use online communities. Now, at an individual level, you've got your phone in your pocket, and these young people of today will continue to move into other roles in the future. Everything that their experiences are and what they've done successfully, they're going to pass down and move to other people. So I think it's just finding new ways to engage young people by understanding what their needs are and what the technology is that they use. It's not all about technology, but it's the stories you tell, right? It's the things that work well completely without technology still will always work brilliantly, which is people get experiences by doing the volunteering, and then they have that great feedback, both personally and organizations around them really support them and say what a great thing they've done. And they take those experiences throughout their life. And and those skills and the resilience and the improves their kind of mental health and all the benefits that you get from it. So you always want to have that kind of human personal connection all the time. For me, the technology is that gateway, is that enabler. It's an enabler to discover. It's an enabler to explore. It's an enabler to bring people together. It's an enabler to capture information so that you can make better decisions. You might be trying to obviously get some more funds in and you've got that evidence backed by it. Or it may be that, someone's done an amazing thing in some remote area, and you can share that with whole other regions of people that get inspired by that. You can turn volunteers into, I don't want to say it, but I'm going to say it. You can turn volunteers into influencers. So people that influence others, showcase what they do, that bring themselves out of being an individual into someone who's a superstar, So imagine kind of that from volunteers, that you've got as famous volunteers. There obviously are, certain famous people, but you can imagine people wanting to be the famous volunteer that's got all the followers for what they're doing and inspire others to do it. So I think there's a lot of really creative ideas that could be developed.
Yeah, I don't know if you're the same, Matt. It takes me back to the conversations we were having post-lockdown at the M&D Association about, all this research telling us also that people want agency, they want control over their volunteering, and they don't want to necessarily be just fulfilling roles, activities, tasks that are defined by organizations. They want to bring their skills, their lived experiences, their networks, their connections to not necessarily even to an organization, but to a cause or to a community, to make a difference in a way that that suits them. So, I mean, you said it, Paul, in places that suit them. I mean, that's right as well. But also there is something about methodologies. And one of the things that I kind of liked when I was playing with Impactful was it reminded me of mutual aid in lots of ways, or the days through COVID where people were just mucking in and helping their neighbours, because it was saying, what do you care about? What are the things that interest you? What gets you excited? And coming up using the AI technology with ideas about, well, so you like frogs and the environment and you live in this community, and here's an idea on how you can do something to save frogs in your local community. In fact, here's 5 ideas. I mean, it's early days, isn't it? But hopefully, I imagine that will start to connect you with other people who are interested in frogs. So you get a community of interest coming together. And all this happens before you even talk to an organisation. Yeah. Potentially, this is about saying, well, what can I do? And then the tables are turned a bit, because it means that you have people, and I'm always speaking to clients about this, you have people who want to help your organisation, but they don't want to do these roles. And then the volunteer manager hasn't got the resources to manage infinite numbers of activities. But if you've got people who can come up with some fairly frictionless ideas, which don't need lots of corporate oversight, but will fit with the cause or hopefully the organisation, there's a way somewhere in there of marrying those together and capturing people who care about frogs and the environment, but I've never felt that they want to do a role for a wildlife organisation, for instance. There's a way of actually getting people who wouldn't normally volunteer into public service, to use a horrible phrase.
Yeah, I've got that's a really nice lead into something that was really important to me. And that is, how do you create that cause, as it were? So I looked very early on at how Charity Commission used its data. So of course they have categorization. So you've got your causes and you've got your beneficiaries. Not the great language for putting on an app for young people, calling a beneficiary and so forth. It's like, who do you want to help and what do you want to support and so forth. So obviously get the language right there. It was very much going, charities, organizations align themselves with causes. Okay, select the causes that you're aligned with, all the specific activities or opportunities to those causes. And then, as you saw in your own example there, if you're generating your own idea, generating that idea by saying what's your motivations, what's your interest, and what your causes are, and who you'd like to help. So we're using that same kind of mapping of information, both from the idea generation, but also from the more structured activities that the organizations might create. And the organizations themselves are aligned, and their mission is aligned to those causes. So this is one of my questions, and I've got a research paper on this as well, which is, why don't charities merge? Was one of my that was a side investigation, because I was just seeing this challenge that lack of resources, petition for funding, outdated technology, all the rest of it, with maybe, because of course most 95% are really small charities that probably headed up by someone that's very stressed out, trying to keep their cause going, and they find volunteers, trying to do all the paperwork, trying to do trying to get the funding, very much split between. So I think the small charity data kind of shows that you've got this very much kind of 90% of what's going on is trying to operate, get volunteers and perform actions that can help the cause. And then the other side of it is trying to keep money afloat. So very much, but when you wrap all that up, they're trying to make a difference. They've got a cause, they've got a mission. Just down the road, you've got another one that's got exactly the same cause. So from that side of it, I know it's a bit of a side topic there, but it's everyone is trying to make a difference within a subset of Charity Commission classifications. So when an individual member of the public that's not associated with those, and I say that instead of volunteer, because at this point it's just somebody helping out, wants to help their frogs, as you said, then that's their interest, but they're also helping the same cause as the frog helping organizations that already exist. So they are in fact, supporting that organization, even though they're not connected to that organization. Mm-hmm. So I kind of I used to go around asking this question saying, if somebody did something to support your cause, but they weren't your volunteer, do you value that? And the honest answer was always coming back, no. So that because they're not my volunteer. And I can't then justify what they did in terms of my evidence and so forth. And it's like, yeah, but the improvement's been made. So if 1 million people individually helped a cause and the cause itself was dramatically improved, where would that be accounted for? And so the economic value of volunteering generally wouldn't be seen. And therefore that wouldn't help some of the very high level kind of national economics and understanding that. So therefore you're unlikely to get big level funding and so forth. So if you can then generate these ideas and have individual people supporting causes and then knowing that that was against these classifications, as it were, from a data point of view, then you've got some really interesting ways. Firstly, you've got that data that could be made available directly to the sector through consent. And so there's lots of consent, making sure that you've got consent to information. But also you could subsequently tie it up and discover organizations that meet your own interests in that direction. So it's very much a matchmaking. I did once think it was like the Tinder of volunteering, because like swipe left, swipe right, you found a match.
That's definitely existed for me somewhere on an ideation session somewhere about something at some point in time.
I think you'll find this is the chicken shop dates of volunteering podcasts as well.
I'm interested, Paul, in that notion of like, why don't more charities merge and bringing that back to a volunteer context. My hunch around that sort of almost, again, sort of potentially brings me back to that conversation you had with a colleague around Extinction Rebellion, and you started to go, what's the difference you're making? What's the impact you're having? And I wonder if some of that stuff comes down to power and power sharing, and that like a lot of people want to feel empowered to be making a difference. They want to be able to make decisions. They want to make decisions in a way that enables them to make the kind of difference they want and feel like they're making that difference. And I suspect that then leads back to impact, right? It's like, how do some people mobilize to feel like they're making the biggest difference? They form an organization to make a difference, right? Where they can make decisions and they can do that. And the most sort of frictionless version of that is probably Chris's version, which is like frogs. To other people like frogs in my community, why don't we get together and just help the frogs? Like, there's no friction in that at all, is it? It's just directly helping frogs. As soon as that becomes more complicated, or you want to make that impact bigger, that starts to have to be formalized around something. You have to start to make harder, more complicated decisions than just what day are we going to help frogs? And all of that brings sort of complexity around power and decision making that needs you to structure yourselves and organize yourselves in increasingly more I don't know if I would necessarily need to use the word complicate, increasingly more structured ways, to make decisions. And the more of that you put in, it seems to me, the more friction you might create around actually helping out. I don't know, to use your term there.
Yeah, so once that happens, you're right. You're now in a situation where the organizations have got all this management overhead, in essence, depending on the complexity of what they're doing. And then on the other side of it, this is why it's really important to give agency to individuals to make a difference, because an individual isn't, caring that a local organization has put themselves into a difficult position. They just want to help. And so if they can help, that comes back to that question going, great, if you can make multiple ways for an individual to be able to help, then they're going to be more involved, and therefore that's going to have a trickle-on effect. Part of that is that the organization has created an activity that you could do, or an opportunity you can get involved in. Great. But if not, you can still come up with your own ideas and do it. So then it comes down to the value beyond that. And it gets that question of saying, so lots of people have the ability to do something in a more effective way than they might have been able to do otherwise. So what? Okay, now 1 million people, now 2 million, now 5 million people over 5 years. Lots of things happened. So what? So, that's been a question to myself, as well as within all the research that I've, tried to find, is who values people doing things? Who values that support if it's not the individual organizations themselves, so that they can get funding, so that they can keep going and hopefully obviously make some positive change to the particular cause that they've got.
And I think there is some hope out there, Paul, in that some organizations are thinking in more collaborative terms, at least some leaders are. So I'm minded to think back to when we had Michael Phillips on this podcast from Crisis, I think to a degree, Anne-Marie Zawitsky at MedCap as well. Michael, I particularly remember talking about him and actually his CEO. Actually, Michael's not with Crisis anymore; he's moved on. But his CEO at Crisis, very much saying that their strategy and their whole ethos has to be tackling homelessness, not just through Crisis, partnering with anybody, whether they're organisations or individuals, who in any part of the country can make a difference and make a contribution to ending homelessness. And their duty was to work in a much more of an ecosystem approach rather than just, this is Crisis and this is what we do. So I hope there is some movement in that direction. I recognise both the ego and the organisational structural problems and challenges that come with that. But I think there is some thinking across, at least in some parts of the sector, that's perhaps starting to recognise that. There's been an age-old conversation about how do we really link mutual aid with the sector as well. And it's got an awful long way to go because there does seem to be parallel universes, in my view, very often. But absolutely, I think there's something incumbent on us as charities of whatever size to be linking up and realising we are parts of communities. We are parts of a cause or a movement, and actually we're stronger working together. I know my own experience, Matt, I don't know if you thought that when we were at M&D Association, and the new kid on the block was the Doddy Weir Foundation, probably. There was a time when we could have come to loggerheads as organisations, but actually I think the mature approach was the one that was taken, thankfully, was to say, well, actually, no, we're all working for the same cause here. We can partner together. The competition even, I think, strengthened both of those two organisations. So, yes, you might say, Paul, well, why don't you merge? But actually, I think in some ways, actually, the cause of M&D was stronger by having two players. And I actually think the M&D Association probably upped its game as a result of that competition as well. But equally important, it worked with the Doddy Weir Foundation, collaborated on campaigning, collaborated on funding, did lots and lots of fundraising events together, and people were running for M&D. They weren't running for the organisations necessarily. They were running in response to the call. So I think there is some hope, but I also recognise where you're coming from, that there's too many of us are just fighting our own corner around funding. And that's natural as well in the current environment where funding is so hard to come by for charities, I guess.
Yeah, I think, I certainly take it from the angle of going, okay, if somebody does something for a cause and it's not directly associated to an organization, just, what's the best way of linking them up? Here's some recommendations of other organizations that you might want to join with, and then that gets back into traditional route of you're now a member of this organization or you're a volunteer as part of it, and then you can kind of move into the volunteer management. So I always see it impactful as like the link to other existing ways of doing things. It just kind of brings people in, even opportunities like, there's work, I know there's work going on the ODI for open standards for opportunity data. And that absolutely great. I want that. Of course, I can list all the opportunities as well, just to make it even more information accessible to people. Of course, that's what you'd want as a sector. I'm really kind of crossing my fingers that progresses. And I do know it's very challenging when you're trying to get the exact set of information to define it that everyone agrees on, but it's in progress, and that's great. And all of the existing opportunities that are out there, which are mostly like links to existing web pages or wherever it may be, just making that available to people. One goal is the more people that are passionate working on these charities or organizations, any VIO, and is great. You don't want to lose them by saying, well, we only need one of you because you're all doing the same thing. And so that's not really, that's more of an observation in terms of the allocation of value. So when somebody does something, who takes it? Everyone. It'd be like carbon offsets or something. If so, there's a bit of a segue there, but it reminded me of a conversation I had before about how companies were using the fact that they could plant trees so that they could get offsets, so that they could get a better loan from their bank, for example. And then when I dug into that, it was a different time, different conversation. But when I explored into that, they were just being resold the same thing. Different organizations were just getting the same value from the same tree planting, which was, a scandal. I don't know if that came out as a scandal, but that was a massive kind of scandal. So this is kind of like equivalent in terms of somebody does some good and multiple organizations take the value of that thing that was done. So you got to be careful about that. So there is some mechanisms there, but it doesn't take away from the fact that if somebody does something good, that's great. Make it possible, get them into it, don't create those barriers, and and we'd see the difference.
Yeah.
It seems to me that bit people helping causes rather than helping organizations is really critical to this. And that mindset might start to help us think differently about some of this. It's like if you if you take the cause almost like as a problem in the world or a difference you're looking to make in the world. Again, and I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I think there is part of this which is critical to the mindset shift. I think you start to not design things like jobs. You start to think about tasks and breaking things down. As soon as you start to say, these are our people, this is our organization, this is our role in society, you start to create roles for those people that look like jobs, and you start to bring everything in. I wonder if you start to go, this is a cause, this is a problem,
a movement.
You're almost inviting people to come up with solutions rather than providing what the solution already is in the form of a job, essentially commissioning people to do things. It's like almost engaging people in solving problems rather than engaging people in doing jobs.
Yeah, that's great, because it's about that independence again, isn't it? That ability to, every individual's got different pressures. We know that, different challenges. We have all the financial pressures that we have these days, the cost of living. We have the mobility issue of people moving away from their local communities for work, the second jobs, all the rest of it. We have so many challenges, and that's outside of deprived areas and all sorts of other kind of social issues. So when it comes down to an individual person, having that ability to see how they can help and contribute in the way that they want to. Now, yes, if there's things there, if the organizations have created something that is appealing, that is well supported, that is well done, that's convenient, then great. Because one of the biggest barriers that we see in all the research is that exact thing. It feels like a job, and I've got enough jobs and I haven't got enough time, and you're going to make me jump through some hoops, and you can do it. Now, some of those may turn out to be absolutely amazing experience and so forth, really well organized, but that's a barrier to start with, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's not just about power. I think it's also about ownership. I think, by having that approach where you can find your own solution, you're not just having the agency, but actually it's sort of a part of an ownership of the shared challenge that we're trying to address, which I think is quite important too. But that sounds like a good time to take a break.
If volunteers power your organisation, here's something you'll want to hear. At Investing in Volunteers, we know great volunteering doesn't happen by accident. It happens when organisations commit to giving volunteers the very best experience, one that's safe, supportive, meaningful and genuinely impactful. That's why more than 1,000 organisations across the UK and Republic of Ireland have chosen Investing in Volunteers, the quality standard for good practice in volunteer management. Whether you're a CEO looking to build a stronger culture or a volunteer manager wanting to boost retention and engagement, working with your designated experienced assessor gives you a clear, practical framework whilst also upskilling your team. And the best bit is not about perfection. It's about learning, improving and showing your volunteers they truly matter. Earlier this year, Prostate Cancer UK achieved their 3rd award and said that going through the assessment has been a valuable and insightful experience, a great opportunity to reflect, learn and grow. So if volunteers are part of your vision, make Investing in Volunteers part of your strategy. Find out more and sign up for your free no-obligation quote at investinginvolunteers.co.uk.
As a volunteer manager, you're asked to wear many hats. No doubt your inbox is overflowing. You're using tools that don't speak to each other. And quite frankly, more time than you'd like is spent on admin and manual tasks.
Volunteero exists for this exact reason. Volunteero helps volunteer managers bring all aspects of volunteer management into one easy-to-use, flexible system that can be molded to your exact needs. It is so much more than a database that sends out emails. It is an all-encompassing platform that empowers your volunteers to do more.
We hear amazing feedback from their clients that include the likes of the RAF Museum, the Royal Voluntary Service and Keach Hospice. So if you'd like to learn more, book a demo on their website, volunteero.org, or email them at hello@volunteero.org. So we're back. Welcome back. Paul, there's a few things you said which struck with me around language. And you said yourself that, language is very important, not least because you're aiming at a younger demographic, and some of the language that we may use in the sector might not always fit with that demographic. And certainly some of the organizational terms are probably not going to fit very well. And you've used several times the word help, or the phrase helping out, which I really quite like. And we often talk in this podcast that although we're volunteering podcast, sometimes the language of volunteering, including the word volunteering even, can be quite off-putting to some people, but also carries some baggage, because volunteering in people's consciousness often describes something that's kind of formal, that's kind of regular, quite a big commitment. And so we as professionals, when we talk about volunteering, I think sometimes we feel that by using the word, we actually put people off, because some of the stuff we're trying to sell in terms of volunteering is ad hoc, it's short term, it's micro, all these things. And somehow the very words micro and volunteering feel like an oxymoron. They don't seem to quite fit together sometimes. So I'd be interested in your take on the world that you're sort of talking about, which is sometimes in the sort of mutual aid, just find an individual finding their own solution and finding their own tribe, how we perhaps should be changing the language, and what the rest of the sector, the volunteering world, could be learning from some of that thinking.
Well, there is, as you said, these are conversations that happen in every room, everywhere, every day. I'm certain of it. I've heard a lot of them. The big help out is called the big help out because it's not called the volunteering day. So that's great. That's a good example of changing the language to remove some of those initial barriers. So I like that. I think that's great. And that's obviously quite a high level kind of marketing side of it. It's just like, kind of general message. And there are a lot of these challenges around, doing something in a moment or with a bit of funding, and then it's kind of lost. So you have to embed these things over a long period to kind of get that change. It's interesting, the word volunteering, because that's been around. I really wish I could remember, because I did look up, like, when was the word first invented? It was hundreds. I don't know, I'm going to get it wrong, but like, it was a lot longer than you would think about it as a term. And we know that words are important to describe a thing. So the idea of volunteering, giving your time for someone outside your family for free and so forth is, you don't need that. A young person, doesn't need to kind of know all these definitions and everything, but it's the right word for probably what we're talking about. But you've got to be able to not use that word. We know if you've got children. So I've got a 12-year-old, and a lot of people that have got, any child of a certain age will know that, language isn't what you recognize at all.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's some things I've had to look up. We go, what's he saying to me there? And of course, again, over the years, that's not just, a particular demographic. That's just the culture that you're in any given year as well. So that freedom of expression is really important. Again, I'm mindful, if you're trying to build something, anytime you advertise anything, you put something on a screen, you put something on the TV, website, any way you like, the words that you use are going to attract a different audience or give us obviously a false message or so forth. So if you're trying to build something for a particular audience, you do have to understand that, but then give freedom for that expression within it. So I think the most important thing is to not dictate. I think Stephen Fry, used to be a big advocate of swearing, for example. He was people should be able to express themselves. And so he was like, don't get all uptight about words that are used and so forth, because it's the language, it's the culture and so forth, and that's different for different generations and so you just have to not dictate, I think. And so it's more about just giving people the freedom, the platform, the ability, you said, that expression to achieve what the end goal is for them. The way that they describe that, the way they talk within their community, their groups, it's really important to not be this top down. You must act in a certain way. You are a robot. You must use our language. You must fill out our forms. You must send us this thing. It's like, you must act in this way and so forth. I know, I'm making that kind of simplistic, but if you do that, you will alienate people, and you won't necessarily get that organic connection, that organic nature of, I'm doing something, my motivation is to do things with my friends, or even as we know, different regions, different communities will act, will talk, not just the different regional accents and everything, but just the words that use, everything about it. Try everything you can to remove that. From a technology point of view, it's a case of, you got an AI you want to talk to? Well, obviously you can talk however you like to it. It's just gonna understand you. If you're gonna share something with your friends on what you want that's going to appeal to them, so that they can send it on to someone else and they can get involved. Now, if this information is collected, depending on what is given consent to be collected and so forth, then someone's got the task of trying to figure out what people are doing, what they're saying and so forth, and how that comes together. But I think you'll be happy. That'll be a problem that's not a bad problem to have.
I'm interested in how all these platforms, I suppose, and all this data all kind of fits together. And I hear, Paul, that, the way you talk, that you're very passionate, not just about the access to the market for people who want to volunteer, but also how we make really good use of the data across the sector so we can drive causes forward and be more impactful, to use a good word. And there's a lot of chatter, and I think it's really interesting around open data, and how the non-technologist in me kind of sees that in my head is that when I want to find a way from getting from A to B, I might go onto an Uber app perhaps, and I can look on there and I can see the train times, the bus times, the flight times, and all these kind of things. And none of that data belongs to Uber or to Expedia, whoever it might be. It sits elsewhere and it's shared across multiple platforms. But whichever one I go on, I can get access to the key data. Maybe I can join those things up. And it makes, from a consumer point of view, that makes life a lot easier for me. But in volunteering, it still feels like there's bits of data over here on this platform and there's bits of data over there on that platform. Some of it joins up. But from a volunteer's point of view, I would have thought I'd want to be able to have a much more connected ecosystem of data and opportunities. And I wonder, just philosophically, how you feel about that and what you think the sort of direction of travel is.
I think it's fundamentally the most important thing that could be worked on. So I feel quite passionately that it's a good thing, exactly the way that you described it there. Because like those other apps that you talked about, where you've got this shared data, you've still got a difference within the individual apps or websites or whatever, but you've got the shared data in the middle of it. So individually, you can still create this very unique set of tools that's for a particular demographic. And you can, so you've still got this great breadth, but at the heart of it, and they can create opportunities individually and ideas and all these things separately, or volunteer management or discovery platforms, and everyone can really contribute to the overall sector and the overall causes. So that's absolutely what I believe in. Everyone should be doing it, as I say, not competing, just opening up opportunities and finding ways to improve that. So when you've got the concept of open data in that as well, and everybody has the possibility of contributing to that and then sharing that, you're just creating reach. And if you create reach, then you've got more opportunities. Everyone should be shaking each other's hands to show that information and say, right, we're all individually trying to find ways of getting people involved, and we're going to share everything that we've got. If that's simply a big list of opportunities, then great. I don't see anything wrong with that. That's absolutely superb. There are more technical challenges around, where that's stored, the ownership, who's managing that, how's it fed in, how's it fed out. There's lots of technical aspects, which then you boil it down to, okay, you go from this kind of shared thing to kind of an ownership model of who's in charge of that. And from that side of it, you might have kind of questions about trying to ensure the transparency of that very system. How do you manage consent? If somebody that wants to remove that, or if you've got this open data, once it's been discovered, once it's been made available, if you interact with it in some way, is it capturing information by the individual on whatever platform it happens to be on? And if it is, how is that managing consent at that level? Maybe it doesn't, and it's pure discovery. So I think as a subject, it's really, really interesting. Would love to be involved in those conversations, because I think from a technical point of view, there's lots of things I personally think I could offer to that. But as a concept, if it is truly open, and it's not just open for say 3 platforms or 4 platforms, if it is truly open and it's managed, then it should be supported for everyone.
But we'll see how things develop, and I hope anyone listening will hear your offer of support. Obviously, you're bringing an awful lot of the technical know-how and experience to that conversations. So what's next for the development of Impactful? What should we be expecting?
Well, interesting. Yeah, I mean, because the world of AI, the world of software development is advancing. I mean, that's a whole other subject for another time. But I am absolutely been in fully deep feet, legs, arms, everything in AI since the beginning, and I've really tried to apply that to our ability to develop fast. Still, you need that experience. You need that kind of life experience to be in control of it. There's this real terrible situation. I was at an event recently where it just seemed every other person would stand up and say, "Oh, look what you can create really quickly. Look what you can create, and it's a prototype for something else, and then you can do it." And you could see the room like just lapping it up and buying into it. Because obviously without experience, I felt like a real party pooper standing up and saying, "Can I just put a word of warning in here?" It's like, yes, there's amazing creativity possibilities to do things, but you absolutely have to take all your things seriously. Your security of data, your GDPR, just everything, all the legal structures around it, your safeguarding, all that stuff has to be baked in. You have to know that yourself, and your general software development, just everything about it, you got to do right. Otherwise you will end up having a mess of new software coming out. So from an Impactful's point of view, being able to utilize all this and develop quickly means we're being very creative in what we can do and then getting it out. Just literally in the last week, because of course we're doing the app and the Impactful Connect, which is the organization platform, so that the organizations can create their presence and then create memberships and see the data and the activities. So it's really kind of like two things simultaneously. The young people is the prime, about probably 70% and then 30% there. So the next thing for me is really going to be around that young people's community, sharing this with your friends so that you can create groups, like your WhatsApp groups, but with, obviously a lot more kind of functionality in there around what you're doing, who's it for, having the AI in there, generating ideas off it, sharing it with others, posting it, stickers, videos, all that kind of stuff, but in a collaborative kind of group, separate from the organizations within your own local communities, whether that's a community of friends or people or locality, whatever it may be. So that's very much coming soon. And from the organization's point of view, there's just there's more analytics, there's more ways of connecting, there's more ways of kind of creating your presence to be seen by a wider audience. There's lots. I mean, it's going to be very exciting over this next few months.
Paul, it's been a really interesting discussion today. Lots of food for thought, lots of things for us to think about. If people want to get in touch, or find out more, how should they contact you?
Yeah, so for Impactful, you can go to impactfulhub.com. And just to know about Enjoy Development and what we do outside of that, it's enjoydevelopment.com.
Perfect. Hi everyone, Chris Wade here with another little footnote at the end. We're midway through 2026, and one of the things I'm really keen to promote for the second half of the year is our cross-sector volunteer experience survey. It's so essential that we have proper quality analysis of the experience that our volunteers have in our organizations. Not an HR survey masquerading as a volunteering one, but a proper volunteering survey with all the right research and insights behind it. Whilst getting your own report, you also get a comparison with the other volunteering organizations who have also participated in this project. So for me, obviously, the richer this is it relies on as many organizations signing up as possible. And then we already get some really good cross-sector data. It's very cheap. You'll have to have a look on our website to take my word for that. I don't make much money out of it. I just think it's a really essential service to our profession and to our sector. So please do have a look. Please give me a call and ask for more information. I'd really love to sign up as many as I can. Big charities, small charities, it really doesn't matter. The real important thing is we get as many people on as possible. So please get in touch, spread the word, and this will be a really rich and valuable resource for the whole of our volunteering communities.